Hello everyone, Ruby Ravel here, a platypus in pain, leaving behind its former attachments, patterns and habits to embark on a journey of personal healing and self-discovery. Here to talk to you today about the North Node in Aries, conjunct Chiron. Now, dealing with the nodes is like wrestling with a slippery serpent. It requires a lot of conscientiousness and the willingness to see both ends of the snake as those coils constantly twitch and adjust and rearrange themselves. The common consensus among astrologers is that the North Node and the aspects that it makes signifies areas of life, qualities or habits that we need to embrace and face on and learn to develop. Whereas the South Node represents things from the past to which we are overly attached and dependent, which we need to relinquish our attachment from and move on more towards the energies of the North Node. And while I do agree that that is basically true in principle, the actual experience of the nodes is much more complex and requires much more calibration, fine-tuning and considerate maneuvering. I see it more as an act of driving a vehicle. The North Node represents the acceleration, the momentum, the engine and firepower that is pulling us forward into terra incognita, into unknown territory that is opening up and expanding our personal power and range of experiences in this human existence. But the South Node, rather than just representing bad stuff, which I think it can get a bum rap for, acts as a brake, as an anchor, as something that is modifying and refining the nature of our movement. When we get too caught up in the accelerando, in the forward thrust and heroic momentum of the North Node, then we can easily find ourselves rushing headlong too fast, as it represents energies that feel new, novel, strange or alien to us, which we are coming to grips with. If we rush into those things too much without really understanding them, we can be inclined to be excessive, to go to extremes, to overdo whatever is going on in that particular area. I often see the nodes as being like an upward journey climbing up a tree. The South Node is the deep, nourishing roots of the past that give us a sense of stability and ancestry and security and personal history, but to which if we become too attached to, we lack movement. Just as if we have our brakes on all the time, we can't go anywhere. We are forever trapped in the patterns, expectations and habituations and beliefs of the past. We say, what is possible for me is only what I've experienced so far. Anything new is not possible because I do not yet understand it or experience it. But if we challenge those preconceptions and those comfort zones, we start climbing up that tree. We move through the crown canopy and into the bright sky with its infinite possibilities that expands before us. Even though it's scary at first climbing up that tree and feeling like we are leaving behind the safety of the ground, the safety of the known, there is the exhilaration and the excitement of feeling like we are making progress, that we are moving upwards in our lives, that we are seeing and experiencing, feeling and thinking and sensing things that we never have before, that are helping to round us out in an area where we previously may have been underdeveloped and lacking in some way. But to me, if we just see the North Node as good and the South Node as bad, then once we get high up enough on the tree, we get dizzied by our own successes. We get too enthralled and enraptured with the new ground that we've broken, that we can almost see it as this panacea, as this elixir, as this divine eureka that will somehow solve all the problems that we've ever experienced previously. All we need is this one new energy that we are now experiencing that seems to be the answer and the solution to everything. So it can be tempting to turn around and say, fuck you, South Node, don't need you anymore. And you take out a saw, like in a Looney Tunes cartoon, and you start cutting away the very tree on which you have climbed up, and then wonder why suddenly you fall because of your hubris. So there can be the temptation with the North Node, if we get addicted to that accelerando, to kick over the ladder by which we have arisen, and then to find ourselves very high up, wondering how in the hell we are ever going to get back down again. So to me, the North Nodes, as with all oppositions in astrology, represent the need to be more conscientious about working with polarities, working with dualities, according equal respect and conscientiousness to both sides of what we are balancing, so that through that we can achieve some kind of synthesis and wholeness. And whilst, yes, the North Node does perhaps need a bit more emphasis and attachment because it represents something new or novel or undeveloped, when we need to evolve and accumulate new skills, we can't completely forget about the past. We can use our past knowledge and our past intuition and our past accomplishments to help us stop going completely overboard. We can use the wisdom and skills that we've accumulated from the past to inform our experience of the present without allowing that to take over so much that we don't take the training wheels off. But coming to terms with the new challenges and missions and opportunities and fated struggles that the North Node throws down the gauntlets for us can be hard, because the South Node, it has and can possess such a strong hold over us. I often feel that with the North Node, because it represents the past, it can often feel like a home. It can be something that we feel nostalgic about. You know, when the South Node starts transiting through a new sign or a house or an aspect to a new planet, we can suddenly be flooded with the memories and associations that we have with that sign and with that planet. We can start glorifying the golden age or the experiences that we've lost. It could be old relationships, old jobs, old places that we've lived. That aroma and whiff of nostalgia can be so strong that we start thinking, well, I don't want to develop the qualities that the North Node is offering me. They don't necessarily look very attractive or glamorous. I want the magic spell of what I once had and which once fulfilled me. With the North Node, it often feels like we're taking a gamble, that we're being pushed into exploring this new area of life, but without any of the certainty or promise that what we achieve or accomplish there will actually fulfill us or be enjoyable in some way. Whereas the South Node, it's like, well, I remember that was great. I remember how good that made me feel. I remember those glory days of the past. I'll have 2 more servings of that, please, and don't skimp on the soy sauce. You know, keep that order coming. You order the unknown food on the mysterious menu of the North Node, and you might be lumped with a dish that you think tastes like trash. It can be more of an acquired taste, something that we learn to love and feel comfortable with, rather than it being this rapturous love at first sight. To me, North Node in Aries conjunct Chiron is all about pursuing a journey of personal healing and therapy and catharsis, so that we can live a life that is true to us, our own wants, needs, authenticity, and personal individuality, instead of living lives or being the people that we feel we need to be for the sake of others. there is that need to balance independence with the interdependence that we have in our relationships with others, to balance personal authenticity with the social skills of creating harmony of the South Node. The South Node in Libra represents that perhaps those feelings of social awareness and of living for others or being too relationship conscious have become overdeveloped. South Node in Libra has this wonderful ability to look at other people and have a refined awareness of what it is that they want and need. And because the energies of Libra have a deep desire to be loved and liked and appreciated by other people, they have a heightened responsivity to the receptions and the energies that they are attracting from other people. And because being an air sign and being symbolized by those scales, they have a strong sense of their own inner duality and their own complexity of the fact that they are a multiplicity, that they have many sides within them. Libran and 7th house people can very often get into this habit of going, well, you know, if there are many different people inside me, if I've got many different sides to me, if I've got many different characters inhabiting the greater cosmos of myself, then whenever I'm interacting with someone else, I should choose the side of me that I can perceive they will like and love the best. It's like a casting call in looking at all of the possible cast members that exist within me. When I'm interacting with other people, I'm going to choose those ones that I can see that that other person will value and like and respond well to. And if I can see that there are parts of myself that they wouldn't like, they would clash with, which would create conflict or dissonance, then I will learn to keep those sides of myself behind the scenes, under the stage. They will not tiptoe out onto centre stage. They will not give a performance or a soliloquy. They will remain hidden away. And socially, that is can be a very, very useful skill to have. It's that game of calibration and moderation of being a different person for every new person that you are interacting with, and treating every relationship as an individual thing and using them as outlets for the different sides of yourself so that there can be more harmony and balance between you and other people. And while that's a useful skill, and people who possess that Libran 7th house awareness can often be incredibly likable people because they know how to carefully fine-tune themselves so that you only see the bits that they know you will like and you don't see the bits that you would find repugnant and distasteful, that desire to be loved and adored and adulated by people can become so strong, so overemphasized, that we become willing to chop up ourselves and mutilate ourselves just to get the approval of other people. We can be so afraid of certain parts of us being reprimanded, of being judged, of being condemned, because being Libran, we know what judgment is all about, that we end up just casting whole sides of ourselves into shadow, letting whole sides of ourselves remain unseen and unlived because we're terrified of the reception that they will get if people knew about those sides of themselves. We want us to come on stage and them say, oh, this person, they're so beautiful, they're so charming, they're everything that I need in the moment when I'm with them. But over time, all of what you've buried and haven't allowed to live in yourself starts to feel jealous and angry and resentful that it's not being loved and appreciated like the rest of it, that it's always being kept below stairs or backstage. It's like this angry actor in the wings saying, well, why are these guys always hogging the stage? Why do they always have scenes written for them? When is it going to be my chance to shine? So after a while, if we commit too solidly to this mode of living, we end up constantly performing acts of self-editing, self-censorship, self-denial, until all that we feel we are in the end is just a very nice, a very appreciable facade, but with no genuine person behind it, just a lot of the anger and resentment we feel from not getting to be the person that we want to be. We're so focused on the person that we think that others want and need us to be, that we destroy and downplay anything that doesn't fit into that neat mold. We long to get along with people, to harmonize with people so much that any part of us that could potentially cause conflict or dissonance, or which could make us be disliked or unappreciated, we'll just say, well, that's got to go. But then we end up cutting away parts of us that are actually we do love, which do bring us joy, which do bring us happiness, which are necessary in some way for our survival and sense of wholeness. So there can be this really odd feeling sometimes when we have succeeded in the game of South Node in Libra or in the 7th, where yeah, we can say, actually, I'm a popular person. Yes, people like me. Yes, people think I'm beautiful. Yes, people seem to love me. And yet, for some reason, I still feel hollow. I still feel unfulfilled. I still feel that actually these people don't really know me, because all they see is the one side of me that they want to see, that they love, that they're attached to. They don't see the rest. They don't see what is behind that Venusian mask. I never get to be what I want to be. And while everyone else seems to be fulfilled by my behavior and my niceness and my consideration of them, I come away with nothing, because I'm terrified that if I ask for what if I want, if I ask for my needs to be fulfilled, if I ask for a little mutuality and reciprocation, then I'm not going to get it. Then maybe they won't think I'm so nice. Maybe they'll think I'm a bit more distasteful and repugnant and not this perfect beauty that they thought I was. You know, with Venus ruling Libra, we can be so attached to that image and want it to be this perfect Venusian goddess who has everything in order and who has everything in balance. We don't want the mask to slip. We're terrified of how people will respond if they saw what was genuine. So the question I think we then have to ask ourselves to orient ourselves more towards that North Node to correct that imbalance is to ask ourselves, well, if I wasn't worrying constantly about other people, if I wasn't worried about getting their approval, getting their love, or being what I thought other people wanted or needed me to be, if I cut all considerations of that audience out of my head and just listened to my own gut, my own impulses, my own wants and my own desires, who am I? What would I be? How would I be? How would I live my life? What actions would I then take on my own behalf? And that isn't actually an easy thing always to do or to answer if we've lived for other people for so long, if we've allowed ourselves to identify too strongly with our relationships and the person we are in those relationships rather than ourselves as a unique, separate individual, we can sometimes forget what it feels like, and we can also feel a lot of guilt and shame and pain associated with that individual, separate sense of self. Being a single, solitary, individual person is often lonely and scary. It means being separate and cut off from the rest of the world in some way. And Libra in the South Node is often terrified by that sense of being separate. It wants to belong to something. It wants to belong to some kind of connection, to some kind of partnership, to some kind of community, to some kind of confluence with the rest of the human race that gives it a sense of importance. All of the cardinal signs, to some degree, care a lot more about status and how they are seen by the world than the other signs. And Libra aspects generally want to be seen as socially developed and socially proficient, as someone who is liked and loved and appreciated by other people, who has some form of social and interrelational power and personal beauty and expressiveness that other people can appreciate. Actually taking the step to being ourselves for ourselves can feel scary, because we become worried that we might become exiled from that sense of connectivity and partnership with the human race. We might worry that committing to ourselves will necessarily mean divorcing and ending our connections with other people, to choose to be this lone ranger of authenticity rather than someone who is beloved, but at the consequence of sacrificing half or maybe even more of themselves. But also I think there can be the difficulty sometimes of choosing to pursue a course in life that is 100% true to who we are and what we want, because then that gets seen as selfish. We tend to lionize the virtues of selflessness and self-sacrifice, and group and social and interracial conscientiousness so much that we see the opposite as being completely evil and negative in some way. That any kind of self-fulfillment has to be seen as a sort of deranged and toxic egotism. And yet I say this, but I do feel there has been a backlash against that. I think especially in general since Chiron has been transiting through Aries, I think more people have become aware of the fact that no, even if we recognize that we are part of a global consciousness, or part of a universe, of parts of relationships of which we have to be conscientious and considerate and compassionate and kind, all of that relationship is still stemming from our immediate relationship with ourselves. And if we are not fulfilled, if we are not happy, if we don't feel valued and appreciated for the singularity of what we are as a solitary organism, whatever we have to press down and crush, whatever parts of ourselves we end up therefore hating or loathing or feeling dissatisfied with because they haven't been loved and appreciated by the group, all of that simmering resentment and self-loathing and hatred and pain ends up finding ways of infecting these larger systems of relationships in which we become involved. So too great a personal pain for the sake of others ends up infecting and destabilizing and polluting and poisoning our relationships with one another. You know, I know there's that tawdry old aphorism that in order to love other people, you first have to be able to love yourself. While I don't think that's completely true as an absolutism, as with many of these cliches, there is some grain of truth in that the quality of our self-love will determine, to an extent, the quality of the love that we are sharing with other people. To love someone else without truly knowing who you are is a mysterious experience. You know, Libra often feels it can only understand itself, and this goes to the 7th house as well, often only feels it can understand itself when it feels itself mirrored in another. And while there's nothing too wrong with that, sometimes we can get stuck admiring that mirror without just finding ourselves within ourselves by listening to our bodies and our impulses and our own personal fires, rather than always being stuck in the analytical, judgmental part of our mind that assumes that there's a part of us that is good and right and just, and that there's another part that is evil and negative and bad and which has to be downplayed. I think Aries has more of that capacity to say, no, I am me as a totality. There's no ifs and buts about this. I am warts and all. All of those things are me, and all of them crave some form of love and expression. And if I can't get that love from other people, I need to love it myself. And I think this is how the South Node in Libra can sometimes play out in its relationship with Chiron, that we feel that need for healing, we feel that part of us that feels damaged and polluted and broken, and which is suffering from everything that it has endured conglomerately over its lifetime. And it says that, yes, I know I need healing, yes, I know I'm sick and diseased and unhappy in these areas. What I really want is for someone perfect to come into my life who will heal me, who will be my therapist, who will take care of me, who will balance me out, who will smooth out my rough edges, who will say and be and do all of those things that will help me to be myself. Whereas North Node in Aries in Chiron is saying, well, actually, no, rather than healing for other people or expecting that healing to come from other people, we have to be the ones to take the initiative. We have to be the ones to take healing into our own hands, like that old aphorism, physician, heal thyself. And Chiron doesn't necessarily make that healing journey easy. Venus on the South Node is always going to look more attractive than Chiron on the North Node, because Chiron represents parts of us that feel in some way incurably wounded or broken or imperfect or malformed by their very function. If you know the mythology of Chiron, you know that he was the wounded centaur. And that is only really part of the story, because I feel like the wounding of Chiron is not just the fact that he was struck by an arrow accidentally fired by Hercules, tinged with the poisonous blood of the Hydra, which left him in constant pain, because he was an immortal. He couldn't, because he was semi-divine, he couldn't die, and yet he also couldn't heal the constant pain that he was in. And yet I feel some of the oddity and the quirkiness and the malformation, or perhaps fears of unlovability with Chiron, aren't just connected to that myth, but the fact that he was also a centaur living in a human world. You know, he was half human, half horse, half man and half beast, like all of us are in one way or another. And that's why I use the analogy of the platypus at the beginning of this video, because a centaur, a bit like a platypus, is neither one thing or another. It's a maverick, it's a Lollapalooza, it's a one-off. It's a freak of nature. It's a strange yet wonderful, terrible aberration. And I think Chiron must have experienced some of that specialness, but also painful loneliness all his life of being this centaur who was considered the only one of the centaurs who could be trusted. The rest of the tribe of the centaurs were considered wild, unruly barbarians who were dangerous and quarrelsome and belligerent and inclined to steal your womenfolk and go in raids on your town like the nomadic tribes of that time used to do, whereas Chiron was civilized. He had transcended his animality. He had transcended the bestial limitations of his lower half, and had learned to channel, metabolize, and transmute them into higher wisdom and knowledge. He seemed to be the master of just about every skill set that was valued at the time. Music, poetry, rhetoric, astronomy, astrology, warcraft, philosophy, you name it, he seemed to have mastered it and became the tutor for all of the famous heroes of that period, from Hercules to Theseus. And yet I think living among humans as someone who was very obviously and clearly not human must have been very painful and lonely. His difference made him special, but it also made him separate. And I think where Chiron is in our charts, whether natally or by transit, can represent an area in which we feel we will always forever be different from other people, in which we are denied the safety of feeling like we slot neatly into the collective. It's an area where we feel like an alien, we feel like a freak, we feel like an exile, we feel like an outsider. And I feel like in that relationship between the South Node in Libra and the North Node in Aries, I think the South Node in Libra might want to find a way of moving away from that. It feels that Chironic sense that it is horribly different in some way, that it feels almost like a curse, even if it could simultaneously also be a source of specialness and a talent and a gift. And I feel like the pull of South Node in Libra might be to say, well, yeah, I can see there's that freakish part of me that maybe others might see as ugly or strange or aberrant. I'm going to make sure that they never see that side of me. I'm going to make sure that it stays hidden away in its cave on the Mount of the Muses, and that people only see my beautiful Venusian side. In fact, I think one of the things that South Node in Libra can sometimes do is surrender to conformity. It sees the safest way to being loved by the group is to make it a uniform, law-abiding member of the group, to say, hey, I'm being the nice guy, I'm being the nice person, I'm doing all the things that society expects of me. Give me love and affirmation and approval, please. And don't look at the Chiron hiding behind the curtain. And yet Chiron in Aries wants to be loved, not in spite of its wounds, not in spite of its imperfections or difficulties or the tragedies or traumas that it's endured in life, but for all of those things to be respected and seen and valued as an inherent part of its beautiful and tragic history. It reminds me of the Japanese ascetic of wabi-sabi, where while in this country we might have a beautiful bowl and it gets broken and we say, oh, the bowl's broken, well, I'll just throw it away. In the Japanese ascetic, they love those cracks. They love the little pieces of damage that are done to these works of art that reveal their fragility, because their imperfections make them more perfect. They make them more poetic. They make them more real and human and relatable. They tell you that this object is not just a pristine ideal from Plato's world of forms, but it has a history, it has a narrative, it's gone through tragedies, it's gone through traumas, it's gone through difficulties, and yet it has still remained in the world as something that is demonstrably beautiful. And I think Chiron and Aries can say, well, actually, these parts of me that are apparently damaged, apparently seen as being vulgar or not in keeping with the smooth, even ascetic standards of the Libra and South Node, are actually amazing. And I feel like definitely Chiron in Aries has expressed itself collectively in the body positive movements that we've seen emerge and gain greater social traction, especially over the last few years, of saying that different body shapes and different body sizes can be beautiful, that we don't all have to adhere to this same social law and social standard that says this is beautiful and this is not. Chiron and Aries says all of these different manifestations of human individuality, of the human form, can be beautiful. So we've had the body positivity movement, we've had, people standing up much more for disabled rights and expressing the beauty of those different bodies and formations. And I feel also that plays a lot into the role of the LGBTQ community as well, of saying all these different manifestations of gender and sexuality that deviate from that nice social contract of normality. All of these things can and should be loved. And I think having the bravery to take off that Libran mask that we know will make us love, but which we know will not fulfill us, and instead to be and manifest and express a side of us that is true to us, but which may not be loved, requires an awful lot of bravery. But that bravery is what North Node in Aries is all about. Aries in the North Node is all about taking risks, about being courageous, about breaking away on one's own, to go on one's own journey, to not lead the life that has been prescribed for you or agreed for you or approved for you or socially sanctioned for you by other people, but which is calling from the fires burning in your own soul. We know that we are on the right path with North Node in Aries when we feel passionate about something, when we feel excited about something. As the first sign of the zodiac, it represents the thrill of beginning and starting afresh, of going into the unknown and not approaching it tentatively with fear and caution and feeling that everything needs to be planned and mapped out in advance, but saying, no, I will take life on its own terms, and I will respond with spontaneity and courage and positivity and optimism to what I approach along the way. I will respond with an affirmative philosophy of saying that whatever happens, I can make it work for me, and it will all be part of my own personal journey and tapestry and self-fulfillment. It's taking the risk of being an enthusiastic, blundering fool, but an enthusiastic, blundering fool that is truly you, and not just a beloved image that is keeping you hollow and diseased inside. But like I said, this is also why I see the navigation of the North Node and the South Node as more of a balancing act, of a fine, careful calibration and tweaking and adjustment, rather than just a simple linear journey from A to B. That the Aries energy, taken to its most extreme, especially with Chiron on its side, can be dangerous and destructive. We can go so far away from the self-moderation and social awareness of Libra to the total rampant egotism of Aries, that we lose that middle ground. I feel like the meaning of the nodes is saying it is possible to be yourself, to be true for yourself, to pursue your own journey, but that doesn't mean you have to be an asshole to absolutely everyone around you. There has to be the willingness to use your head. The North Node is the dragon's head after all, so it requires some conscientiousness, some willingness to think and not just respond to instincts. It is possible to be oneself and to get along with others as well. I just think that with the North Node in Aries, we have that courage to strike out on our own, and to also have that perspicacity to cut away or move away or distance ourselves from relationships or connections or obligations or duties or adherences that have become too draining on us, that are not giving us or inspiring us or enlivening us like we should. There are those things we need to chop off, but I feel Chiron in Aries can sometimes go too far the other way, of having this if you're not with me, you're against me attitude, of being this wounded Frankenstein's monster who, after having been repressed for so long, feels some of the anger and the rage of wanting to revenge itself on the world that it has felt has rejected it. Working with Chiron's energies can be very difficult, because a lot of wisdom and self-awareness can come from embracing those areas where we are hurt and where we may always hurt, but also pain can make us angry. Pain can always make us want to look for a scapegoat, to look for that other person, to look for that South Node in Libra that we can blame. Part of working with Chiron and the North Node in Aries is taking more accountability, is taking more responsibility for who we are and ourselves, rather than feeling that it always has to be blamed on some social nemesis out there. So I feel it's about finding that relationship between the two, of knowing those moments where we have to pursue our own path and be true to our own authenticity, and to look after our own healing and to look after our own wounds, and to go through the therapy and whatever therapeutic journeys we have to go on to help become more of ourselves. But also to remember that, life isn't always about us. Life isn't always about our own heroic journey. And while we don't want to backtrack too far the other way with the South Node in Libra, which may eventually come to the point of saying, well, I'm not important at all, and I'm willing to downplay myself completely for the sake of not rocking the greater boat of social harmony, we still need to recognize that we are an individual working amongst other people, and that other people are also going on their healing journeys, and that if we really want to feel supported by other people on that journey, and to not feel like everyone is being antagonistic or resentful for us for breaking out on our own, we also have to be aware and conscientious of other people going on their healing journeys, and to offer some consideration and kindness to them without losing ourselves in the process. Anyway, I don't want to keep on blabbering forever. I hope I've gotten my point across. I hope you enjoy this video. Please tell me your own stories relating to these matters. I'm sure some of them are bound to be redolent to you. I've already seen these transmutational processes taking place in many people's lives, including my own. But I would also say, more than anything, do look at the houses that the nodes are transiting in your own charts, because those are going to be the areas that will most strongly be impacted by this, more so than the signs and the generic transits. Anyway, please leave comments, please like, share and subscribe. You can email me at thestarsunraveled@outlook.com. You can follow me on Instagram at astrology and underwear, and you can support me on Patreon at www.patreon.com/thestarsunraveled. Go forth, fellow platypi, and spread your seed of self-love.